It's 4 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Oh my God.
First, yes, you do. 'Cause you're going to tour us around, so yes. So first, thank you for hosting us here at Garner. Let's do quick introductions, and then I think that you're going to maybe show us some of the construction areas. Okay, so I'm Molly Abraham, school board director.
Kim Colvin, Board Secretary.
Sorry, I got Twix in my mouth.
Good.
Carmen Gonagali, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Kate Degner, Secondary Math Coordinator.
Kristen Wendland, Elementary Math Coordinator.
Eliza Proctor, Executive Director of Elementary Schools.
Ruthina Malong, Board Member.
Lisa Williams, Board Member.
Jane Finch, Board Member.
Lucas Potancic, Executive Director of Secondary Schools.
Brady Schott, President of the Teachers Association.
Matt Degner, Superintendent.
And I'm Maka Pilcher-Hayek. I figured since we're introducing ourselves to you, I would let you go.
That's right. Okay.
I'm Debbie Bennett, the owner of, no, but. Of the Gators. Now, I'm principal here at Garner Elementary. This is the beginning of my 4th year here at Garner. I took over in 2020. Never want to do that again. And we've grown so much. So last year we had a $1.5, $1.3 million renovation done to redo our front offices and to take down the wall in our cafeteria. We had the smallest cafeteria in the whole district. And why do I know that? Because they sent the numbers out and I scanned it and saw that we were even smaller than Van Allen. And Van Allen has the same setup as we do. So I don't know how that happened, but yeah. So last year we were in construction the whole year. I lived in the closet, in the kindergarten closet. And my secretary, my nurse, and my school facilitator lived out of a kindergarten classroom. It was fun, said no one. All right, so now we have a brand new setup. And so today, you picked a great day to come because Tuesday clubs just started. So University of Iowa's out here for writing club for the K-2 kids. And we're having like art club for 3-6. And then it's like Channel 8, because we're launching a news channel. Yeah, Channel 8. I think they just let out 5th and 6th grade. They're doing morning meeting stuff. And so it's a lot going on at Garner today. Okay, so if you want to take a peruse and look around.
Okay. We have just a quick one thing we need to do is approve the minutes from our May meeting. Can I get a motion to do that?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
From the May meeting.
Okay. Do we need?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
Yeah, you bet. So thanks, guys, and thanks for participating in the tour at a time. We usually try to keep the ed committee meetings at about an hour. Obviously, tonight we might go some past that, a little bit of a tour ahead of time, but we'll still try to be conscious of your time. But we're excited to welcome Kristen and Kate to talk to you guys today about our math program. If you remember, we kind of had a parent question over the summer that I think generated this topic coming back to us here at the board level for a broader discussion about some math programming. And we've had some math topics before in the ed committee, so it felt like a good time to bring that conversation back from a high level. And then if there's questions we can't answer for you tonight, we're sure happy to come back and address those more in the future. But I know they have a presentation planned for. I think there was one quick edit, so we probably have a newer one in board docs. I think one slide they had some changes on, but that's been updated. So if you do have your device, you can also see it on there. And then, of course, I'll turn it over to Carmen to see if she has any more intro she wants to provide before Kate and Kristen take over.
No, that's perfect. They know what they're doing.
All right.
I'm Kristen Wendland. I'm one of the elementary math coordinators for the district. Kelsey Feldman is my counterpart, and she's unable to be here today.
I'm Kate Degner. I'm the Secondary Math Coordinator.
I was very tempted to have you do math today. Like, I came up with a problem this morning. I even created a slide.
And it would have been
and
so
then
fun.
I resisted. So, yep. So no math today. All right, today we're going to kind of be focusing on 3 big areas, teacher efficacy, mathematics curriculum, and MTSS and mathematics. And really all 3 of these things are interdependent and work together. This is the first time I feel like we actually have used these in a meeting. I'm excited about them. These are the mission and visions that we really have for our K-12 mathematics program here in Iowa City. And these came from our self-study work that we did last year. that we'll be presenting in November then to the board as well. So I'm really excited just to read them out loud. So the ICCSD Mathematics program exists to ensure that all students engage in rigorous mathematics, have access to effective teaching and learning with high expectations, and have the support and resources to maximize their potential. And then our vision here is that all students can see themselves as confident, lifelong learners who are able to reason mathematically and make sense of problems in authentic context, empowering them to pursue limitless opportunities.
So in our graphic, the part that sort of wraps around everything else is teacher efficacy in mathematics. The reason that I think we believe that teacher efficacy sort of wraps around everything else that we do is because of what we know about highly efficacious teachers in the classroom. We know highly efficacious teachers are more likely to try out new teaching ideas, particularly techniques that are difficult. They're more likely to take risks, and they're more likely to share control of the classroom with their students, which is directly related to highly efficacious teachers have better classroom management, so more time is able to be spent on instruction. They have positive attitudes toward reluctant students. They're able to build friendly relationships with them and set higher academic standards for them. They positively influence their students' own beliefs about their academic ability and potential, which is a big one in math. And they view student failure as something that's within their control rather than concluding that the causes of failure cannot be reduced by teacher action. So the way I think that Kristen and I see ourselves impacting teacher efficacy in mathematics is a lot of the time that we spend in professional development with our teachers. So we're going to spend a little bit of time outlining what our professional development is going to look like this year.
Yep, and that was exactly kind of the conversation that Kate and I have had here is the impact on our professional development decisions. And this right here is just kind of a big overview of our elementary mathematics plan right now. But our pieces of HRS Level 2 really go into investing in our teachers and in their practices. And that has to do, aligns directly with HRS work as well. And so kind of nice to see it all together. One of the key things, something I always come back to, is that teachers really have an identity of what they see a good teacher being, and then their beliefs about what teaching and learning look like. And those pieces impact all the other layers above it. Some of these layers here, these nested bowls here, the environment, that can be a little bit easier to tinker with. But we know that these down here are really what make that big impact in the classroom for our students and what they're experiencing. So when we think about teacher efficacy and we think about that idea of a teacher has this, they're like, this is what good math teaching looks like. This is what it is for, a good elementary math class to sound like and look like. Those are things that we're working to address right now within our PD that we're doing. And so this year at the elementary level, we're really working on trying to shift and refine. What does that math class look like, feel like, and sound like? We're working on moving it more from a teacher-centered, where they're the bearer of all the knowledge and they're going to impart it, to more of that student-centered. We want opportunities for teachers within this professional development to be able to collaborate and learn across buildings. So what we've done is we've taken all 22 of our elementaries this year and we've put them into small cohorts that are going to meet 6 times throughout the year. We know that we're going to lose some minutes, that we can be able to work with them because they're going to be traveling. However, the opportunity for them to meet and to get outside of just their building and learn from each other is going to be huge. So that opportunity cost right there. And we really want to be able to focus on intentional teacher practices and have them have the opportunity to apply and then come back and share with grade-like partners. So we really are focusing right now on NCTM's effective math teaching practices. And we're really looking again at what are some of those impacts that our beliefs, our identity can then be having on the practices in our classrooms.
So professional development for our secondary math teachers this year. We have two separate goals because in our junior highs, all three of our junior highs are piloting illustrative math curricular materials this year. Illustrative math really pushes shifting the focus from teacher-centered to student-centered, which I think like in writing sometimes it sort of feels like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's a very heavy lift. And people feel very uncomfortable doing that. It cannot be scripted. Which is something that people feel very uncomfortable with. And so with our 7th and 8th grade teachers, a lot of what we'll be doing with professional development this year is supporting teachers through piloting illustrative math materials. I am gathering data to design those professional developments in two ways. One, every PLC that's piloting materials submits a weekly PLC form to me. Are you on pace with the pacing guide this week? Did you supplement with outside materials? If so, what were they? Why did you decide you needed to supplement? If you're not on pace, what happened? How did you speed up or slow down? And then the box that usually I scroll and scroll and scroll is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like me to know? Right? And so I'm using that to design the professional development for those teachers. The other thing is I'm co-teaching in 5 different classrooms this year that are piloting illustrative math materials, so 3 days a week. I'm in classrooms most of the morning, and so sometimes I will see things that maybe teachers in the moment don't pick up on, but it's easier for me to see those patterns across buildings to say like, okay, it seems like everybody, could use some support in this area. So that's with our junior highs. With our high school teachers, we are working on writing proficiency scales, which is part of the HRS work that we're doing this year. The junior high teachers that are not piloting materials are also working on writing proficiency skills. We're using a couple texts to ground our work so we all have a common knowledge to work from. The first text is Building Thinking Classrooms, which Kristen thought about having you do math. I thought about bringing you each a copy of the book. You can tell that we're teachers. So. And then the other one is Planning and Teaching in the Standards Classroom, which is a common book for all coordinators, not unique to math. And then that work will mostly be happening in buildings, but the goal is to have common proficiency scales for like all of the algebra teachers across the district will have same proficiency scale all the way up through calculus. That's sort of like our first little nest. It feels like an okay place to pause for questions if you want to ask any questions related to that, or I can keep going. Okay. So then part of the way that we are really thinking about building our teacher efficacy this year is by the mathematics curriculum that we select to use. So the curriculum that we're piloting this year that Kristen and I have both talked about a little bit is illustrative mathematics. Picking the curriculum is super important because students' math achievement improves significantly when teachers provide effective math instruction, when students are able to use accurate visual representations to solve a problem. I just have to stop on this one because when I learned this like 3 years ago, it blew my mind. Students who can draw accurate visual representations to solve a problem are 6 times more likely than their peer who drew no picture to get the correct answer, which I find shocking. And that's regardless of like whatever your learning style is, right? If you can draw an accurate visual representation of what's happening, you're 6 times more likely to answer a question correctly in mathematics. Students receive cognitive and metacognitive strategy instruction. Student discussion is an integral part of discussion, and students present multiple solution strategies for solving the same problem. So part of the reason that we chose Imagine Learning and illustrative math as materials to pilot is because EdReports, which is a neutral entity that evaluates curriculum, has certified that Imagine Learning addresses all 5 of those bullet points.
So last year, we started out by really looking at the different programs that were available. We've been on a long journey to get to illustrative here. And we, last year, narrowed things down to Eureka Math Squared and illustrative math. And then we had 4 schools that piloted Eureka or illustrative, and we had a committee that went in, did numerous observations, we did teacher surveys, we had student focus groups, we looked at their data and did a big review process for that, and then the consensus really was to move forward with illustrative. And some of the big reasons were because of not only the things that Kate mentioned on that last slide that we saw with it, but the impact that we were seeing on our students as they were doing the thinking. The cognitive load was shifting from the teacher being the bearer of all of the knowledge to our students really being ones who were discovering, who were talking, who were being able to show each other different ways of approaching math problems. We were seeing such an impact on them that's what came down to, we're going to move forward with illustrative. And so these are our buildings last year that piloted: Hill, Shimmick, Wickham, and Longfellow. Now you'll notice that some of them piloted Eureka last year. Well, they now have switched to using illustrative, so I just want to give them a special shout out because that is a heavy lift for teachers to move from one program to the next multiple times. But all of these buildings have now moved to piloting illustrative. And in what we also heard then is, as people were hearing about it through the grapevine, we had a number of other buildings that asked about piloting it as well. And so we were able to add Garner on as a pilot this year, and we also added Kirkwood in the mix too. So we have all 6 of these buildings that are piloting, and then we also put out applications for teachers in the other buildings to be able to apply to be solo ambassadors, is what we call them. And so teachers had to submit an application saying that they would be willing to try this out in their building on their own, which is a big lift. As I came in today, a teacher in the workroom was talking about using the material here, and she was saying, oh my gosh, it's really nice though, I can talk with my partner and we can, be able to bounce ideas off each other. But so these 16 teachers, most of them do not have somebody else in their building, or they're the only one in their grade level that are piloting it. Thank you. Wow.
Small rollout.
Okay, small rollout, soft rollout, I guess, not a pilot anymore. Okay, good. I like doing that.
We
Yeah.
select
Right?
these
Can I
materials, and we
officially
are
say
using
that?
these materials.
Going
but
this way.
Can I-
Due to the budget cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason we're still saying piloting is because last year we did Kindle Hunt, is the resource that was used for, it was still illustrative math, but a different platform. And so we shifted the platform to Imagine Learning for this year. So it's still a different, same math process, but a different platform. And so it's still kind of a pilot process with a new platform, but we have chosen that this would be the resource that we'll be using.
And with those 16 solo ambassadors then, our idea also was that next year when we go district-wide, we'll have those people already in buildings, that will be able to be the leaders, that will be able to share their experiences with their peers in the building. So in total, we have 16 buildings that are using it right now, along with 82 K-6 teachers.
And I think, I don't know if you're going to mention this or not, Kristen, the big piece of the pilot process was that we have a partnership with Imagine Learning that allowed us to do all of this for free. And so the whole pilot process for us with Imagine Learning for Math is going to be free for K-8. And we're working with them through a partnership for data collection, and the data is just to check to make sure that what they mentioned first, the teacher efficacy of the process and the program, is what they're collecting data on and that will share with us. And so we got to do everything for free.
Yeah, it's been a great partnership so far, and including, the PD that they provided as well was phenomenal for the teachers too. So culturally responsive math teaching is a term that we hear a lot, and sometimes people think of it as this addition that they have to put on top of materials. That's one piece with illustrative that we're not seeing at all. It's already there. We're seeing that within illustrative, we're honoring all of our student voices in the math classroom. We're celebrating lots of multiple strategies, and there's lots of student-to-student collaboration and discourse happening. I really encourage you to get out, if you can, to classrooms to see this. One of my favorites I like to talk about when I talk about collaboration is a little girl in a classroom who they were sharing how they were approaching a warm-up. She raised her hand. She goes, I'd like to respectfully disagree. And I was sitting in the back, and so I squinted, but the teacher had a prompt up on the board, and that was one of the ways that she was teaching them to have mathematical discourse there. And I just thought, if we can do that in our math classrooms and with our younger students, think about where we can go as adults as well, because not very many of us use that term very often with each other. And we also see this gamification too, it means we're taking some of our big concepts and we're making it engaging through games that they play also. So I want to just quickly go back really quick because I flipped through this slide, and I want you to be able to see that these are what Illustrative has as their big beliefs about teaching and learning. And they really, these come out. It's one of those pieces that we don't just see it where a company is just saying these things, but these things really are happening. Like our students learn language as they develop mathematical understanding. Illustrative is beautiful in that they have it where they're not just going to tell the students a definition right away, but instead the students are going to play with that idea first, and then we'll attach language to it. So these things, they really come out, and I think about them, and I think about how all this also just kind of coincides with our values and our visions that we have, not only in math, but as a district too for our students. And so here, my last slide, kind of just about that culturally responsive teaching. And when we really think about moving students from being a dependent learner, who I'm waiting for the teacher to carry that load, to an independent learner, where the teacher may temporarily carry some of it, but really our students, they're the ones who have the strategies to get unstuck. They're the ones who have that perseverance to keep going as well. And we're really working so that our students are not just mimicking and replicating procedures, but instead they're selecting effective strategies and are really doing the work of a mathematician. It's not just easy, it takes time.
The last little piece in our first graphic is around MTSS, which stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. So MTSS model usually has 3 tiers. The first tier is school-wide universal instruction. The Tier 1 universal instruction should be effective for about 85% of our students. Second tier is targeted instruction, and this targeted instruction should be effective for about 15% of our students. The thing that I want to point out about this is it's additive, right? So if students are receiving Tier 2 targeted intervention, they're also still accessing the school-wide universal instruction. And then Tier 3 is individual and intensive, and this should be for about 5% of our students. One of the things that I really like about this MTSS model is it can be used in the classroom, and it can also be used to evaluate a system. So like sometimes I'll go in with teachers and they'll be like, I don't know, that lesson felt terrible today. And I'm like, well, do you have the exit tickets? Do you have the formative assessment? Could you look and see, did 85% of your students meet the learning target for the day? Then you probably don't have a problem, right? You'll need to think about how you're gonna reach these students, but it gives us a framework to be able to talk about ways that we can support students, both students that need to be accelerated or enriched, and students that need intervention and extra support. And so this last little part that we're going to talk about today relates to, we've talked a lot about school-wide universal instruction. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions related to MTSS.
So in the elementary buildings, we have universal screening that we do 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. Oftentimes it would be called benchmarking as well. And we're able to then, from that benchmarking, be able to kind of just get a temperature gauge for our students. Students are identified then if they need progress monitoring and or we need some targeted Tier 2 math intervention support. We have in the elementary calendar, in the minutes, 25 minutes of daily math intervention work. And so different schools have fit that into their calendar then during the day. I know in some schools they're able to align it so that the teachers in the classrooms can share students then across those grade levels too, to be able to be more specific and targeted to what students may need. We have an improved intervention inventory as well as the district that we have both math and reading interventions that have been approved. And we work with the buildings to do regular data analysis and then make adjustments for the students based on what we're seeing in that progress monitoring. Right now, our work as kind of coordinators in the elementary world is really, we're working with collaborating with special education and ELL on some viable co-teaching models. Right now, we really look at this year as this great opportunity as we do this, I can call it soft rollout of illustrative, that we're able to go into the buildings and really look at how can we do this as a co-teaching model in special ed and ELL. We're working with those departments and they're going in and doing some visits with us as well. So just a good opportunity for us to really look at that. We also are doing a revision of single subject acceleration process. Which right now, for elementary math, the acceleration and enrichment piece is we have two types of acceleration in the elementary world. There's whole grade acceleration, and then there's math only acceleration. Math is the only subject that we do single subject acceleration in right now. Historically, the elementary accelerations were led by a district level team, so the ELP coordinator and then the math coordinators, Mars, would lead those acceleration, kind of the testing and coming up with the results of that as well too in the recommendations. Last year, a few years maybe even, the decision to transfer that to the buildings was made, and just because the buildings know their students, the principals and the IDS and the teachers that are there, and there's an elementary acceleration protocol that was developed to guide that process. The process now is currently being revised and just looking kind of again system-wide, because one of the challenges sometimes when we're doing it just in our small silos is that we're not able to see that big picture, and maybe we have a student who is standing out here in one building, but when we think about big picture and acceleration and to skip a whole grade level of a content area, that's really a big thing. And and especially as I think about it in so many of our elementary years, those are so foundational to what they're able to do. And so we, again, I think hopefully with illustrative, we're moving from that I can just mimic, I can just count, I can just produce, the division algorithm to really being those deep thinkers. And I see that as a shift, that sometimes we're able to say, oh, that student's really good in third grade math because, gosh darn it, they can just follow that algorithm, no problem. But we want to see deeper learning because we know that in the end then, that's when our students are more successful.
So MTSS in 612, really there are two main goals as we think about rethinking our acceleration and enrichment process. Tier 2 and 3 intervention should always be flexible, right? The goal is we want as many students being served through Tier 1 instruction as possible. And so one of the things that sort of was like, maybe we should look at this is our Tier 3 was enormous. In some cases, almost equal to the size of our Tier 1. So that indicates like there's a problem or something that we need to look at with our level 1 instruction. One of the ways to think about that is like we should be really intentional about the curriculum we adopt, right? And can that help us? It should help us address that. So really focusing on Tier 2 and 3 interventions, they should be flexible, right? Students should be able to move in and out of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. It should be done in a respectful way so that if you're receiving a Tier 2 enrichment one trimester and then you don't need that Tier 2 enrichment for the second trimester, the world did not crumble around you and you no longer think and you think that you're no longer smart, right? It's just a thing that happens. Like, I could probably be enriched in triple-digit addition, but I should probably stick with Tier 1 in triple-digit division. Me personally, I'm not very good at that, right? As we all are. So tiers should be flexible. Students should be able to move back and forth between those tiers in a respectful way. The second thing to really keep track of if we think in terms of equity is each of our tiers should represent proportionally the population of our students. You can think about that in a lot of different ways. You could think about that according to race, you could think about it according to gender, you could think about it according to SES, right? But when we think about our student population in the Iowa City Community School District, the proportion of students that are any one of those things, we should see that proportion repeated in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And if we don't, it just means we have some work to do, right? And we have some tweaking to do. So some of the proposed practices, really to expand the opportunities for above grade level enrichment. If you think about that MTSS triangle, this would really be like a Tier 2 intervention for students. So those students would receive above grade level enrichment. So again, this should ideally be about 15% of our students. And then to try to get closer to about 5% of our students receiving Tier 3 intervention, which right now our Tier 3 intervention for acceleration and enrichment is what Kristen was talking about, which is that whole subject acceleration in math. So who gets access to accelerated or advanced mathematics right now in grades 7 through 12? JP, I got your email forwarded to me from Carmen today, so I went in and added some of the numbers that you're talking about. Some of the other things you asked for, I don't have access to that data, or I couldn't get access to it in like 4 hours, but yeah. So if we think about, this is our reality right now. So this is an end of, we have 430 students currently taking algebra in either 7th or 8th grade. If you think about that MTSS triangle, this is a Tier 3 intervention. That should be 5% of our student population. Currently, that's 37% of our total 8th grade population. Right, which again means like we need to go back and look at our Tier 1 instruction. Like what's happening with our Tier 1 instruction that we apparently cannot serve 37% of our 8th graders with the materials that were intended to serve them in math.
And instead, they're doing something higher.
Higher.
That's right.
Okay, this is,
Which-
it's very hard to understand, like, it's flipping, actually.
Usually
Thank you.
here.
Okay,
Yes.
so I just need to understand what you just said. You think it would have been better, according to the model, if fewer people, if more people were getting challenged at Tier 1.
That's correct.
Okay, I
Which-
just have to make sure I'm following.
Which,
Okay.
since you asked my opinion, which I think means the curriculum that we're currently using in 8th grade is not rigorous enough. Right? If the curriculum we're giving students in 8th grade is too easy, then it makes sense that we have students who,
Right.
teachers, parents, community members, whoever, feel
Yeah.
that they can skip, right? So one of the things that Illustrative Math has done, they took Algebra 1, which is traditionally a 9th grade course, and they split it into 3 groups. A third of Algebra 1 is now in Illustrative Math 6th grade, a third of Algebra 1 is in Illustrative Math 7th grade, and a third of Algebra 1 is in Illustrative Math 8th grade, which if we compare that to the curriculum we're currently using, like that's a huge bump up, like what you're saying, right? So more students should be appropriately challenged in their grade level math. So one thing you can look at is this. The other thing that you can look at, remember our goal is we want proportionality to be reflected among all different types of demographics. The one that I knew how to access on Infinite Campus, although not very efficiently, is race. So this is currently 89% of the students who are in algebra in 8th grade are white. 3% are more than one race. 2% are Hispanic, 3% are Black, and 3% are Asian. That's the actual racial makeup of our district. So we'd like those pie charts to look more similar, ideally. In research, what it says is if you have something that looks like this, it probably means that you're over-identifying students that are in the big demographic, and you're also at the same time probably under-identifying students who are in the demographic that are not as well represented. And so then you can see the same thing with calculus in 11th or 12th grade. I couldn't calculate the percentage because every 8th grader takes a math class, but not every senior takes a math class, so it wasn't as straightforward. So I couldn't do the percent, but we have 140 students in the district taking calculus as either 11th or 12th graders, and again, you can see the breakdown.
So, so here's kind of where my question with like where we might be going to Illustrative. I think a lot of people are probably taking these 8th grade math classes solely because it sets them up for high school to take calculus, right? A lot of people are like, well, if you Because if you take algebra as a freshman, that limits your chances at the upper end. So then if a lesser math is going to take the concepts we're learning in algebra and then break those up, then what do we do at the secondary level so that we don't get into this like, well, but
Okay.
am I opening up like...
I have the answer to this question, but
Damn
I'm
it,
not
box.
sure that any of my bosses want me to say it out loud, if I'm being completely honest.
That's a process that we're currently reviewing.
Yeah.
And so what we are doing is, this is data, thank you Kate, for
Sorry.
She did a good job. This is data that we're currently reviewing.
Yep.
We don't feel good about this, right?
Right.
Like, we know those conversations that you're talking about. The whole reason we're here was, a situation where parents and some students, a lot of parents, want to make sure that in 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, they are predicting their trajectory of their child, making sure that they can get into calculus
Right.
or take courses at the University of Iowa.
Yep.
The process that we're working through right now to review all of this we want to make sure there's still a similar pathway so that students can access this. Something that Kate and her team have put together is actually going to make that a little bit quicker for some students and more accessible for others without missing the foundational math skills that they're currently doing. Like kids skipping 3rd grade math, kids skipping 5th grade math, those are foundational pieces that they miss, and it catches up with them at some point. You're going to notice there's a huge difference between 430 and 142. Those 300 kids didn't want to do that math anymore. Right? They maybe discovered that math wasn't their jam, and that's not what they want to do, or they're not even taking math anymore because
They overruled their parents.
Correct, right? They probably were like, I'm done. Or they took these classes and were like, I wanted to do something else. Where there's a myth that if you don't accelerate in the elementary years, that you can't have access. And we tried it. Like, if kids love that math, they can take more than one math. Molly, I'm sure you saw that. They can take more than one math class at a time if they really, truly are passionate about math. And so we're just trying to rethink the idea that you have to accelerate at a really early age or twice accelerate is what was currently happening with that 6th grade to 7th grade pre-algebra or algebra, which they were twice accelerating. And that became a little bit of what families wanted to see as the norm. So we're trying to shift it.
I think the other thing that happens, we're talking about these 300 missing kids. A lot of those students are planning to go to college. So they either quit taking math at the end of their 10th grade year if they were twice accelerated, or they quit taking math at the end of their 11th grade year. Okay? Then they're going to go to college. They're either going to have to take a placement test, or most students that get a liberal arts degree out of college are going to have to take a math class. Right? So now you've gone a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and now you're going to go and sit in a lecture hall of maybe 300 students, and you're going to try to do this math, whatever. So I also think we just are not, I think as adults we can understand that argument, right? And I understand that, like, I'm not sure my 15-year-old understands that argument, right? But I also feel like it's my job on her behalf to step in and say, like, it's fine that you don't understand the argument, but you're taking math, right? And so I think also as a district, like, we have to do that for kids because we can see farther down the road because our brains are fully developed, than they can.
So let me just open up one more piece on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, right, but this path is like aiming for calculus, right? Like algebra, geometry, algebra 2, trigonometry is preparing you for this calculus, which I think...
AP Calc, yeah.
AP calculus,
Yeah.
like this is that. Like to me, like engineers use that. So as a public school district, I have a problem with that because how many people are going to be engineers? Everybody uses statistics. Like all of us, all of the time, always use statistics. But that's not our pinnacle, and it's kind of an elective that maybe you can take, and you'll encounter statistics your entire life. So to me, some of this historically, right, is it's for kids going to college and even kids going to a certain type of college. So we're spending all this public money for 142, right? Like we're preparing you for that rather than, well, why don't we prepare everybody for what we're all going to encounter? Anyway, that's just a little thing I have. I've had some conversations with some math teachers who Well, we're teaching you to
This is
think.
such a lovely segue.
Send me the money later.
So our current 9-12 math alignment is algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calculus, calculus. You can take we currently offer AP statistics. The prerequisite for AP statistics is algebra 2. So sometimes AP stat teachers will let somebody take AP stat and algebra 2 concurrently. But definitely after algebra 2. So this is what we currently have. It's sort of funny when we switch to this slide. Now we're still talking about MTSS, but we're talking about, I think, sort of like the MTSS triangle that you were thinking of, right? Which is like, here are students who need additional interventions and they need additional support. So now we're talking about, this would be a pathway for students who took 8th grade math, and then in 9th grade they took algebra, right? And then geometry, algebra 2, pre-calculus, calculus, and statistics whenever you want, sort of. When we decided to eliminate below 9th grade level math classes in the high schools, the support for students was to offer a concurrent support class. So students would be taking algebra along with another math class concurrently. Right now that's being offered in 2 of our 3 high schools, the concurrent support class for algebra.
Which two?
Liberty and West.
Yeah, Liberty and West. This also speaks a little bit to what you were talking about. I would say the goal, and actually, I went to Kirkwood on Friday and spoke with a couple people, and I might even adjust my goal right now, if I'm being honest, but the goal would be these are the classes that are required for graduation, right? Algebra, geometry, algebra 2. So instead of just having a concurrent support class for their 9th grade year, like, can we expand that, right? Till we get kids the math that they need to graduate. But to also be able to offer these as dual credit classes instead of only AP classes. I just know from my personal experience of teaching dual credit and AP classes, I can teach dual credit calculus through Kirkwood, and my students, I mean, College Board will take your $90 to take the test. I mean, they're not going to tell you no, right? And so to be able to help set some students up to transfer those credits and take them with them to Kirkwood or wherever they go. When I went to Kirkwood on Friday, I went to Kirkwood to find out some more information about this concurrent support class, and then also this Algebra 2 dual credit class. I'm going to switch slides, but I can come back if...
I just want to make one comment about the concurrent support classes.
Yeah.
You know, it gets challenging because kids have 7 periods, so they're going to have 2 on math, and they might have a learning support if they have an IEP. And so, you know, that's the complication with having them have to take a whole nother class to get the support. So I don't know. I guess it's just a reality. If you have to take the concurrent support class, you do. But I think that keeps the enrollment down.
I think it could also be set up so that students could be getting SDI minutes in that class, particularly
Right, if they have a math goal.
Yeah.
But most kids don't have only a math goal.
Right.
And so they're still probably going to have some time with a special ed teacher. And so it just really gets limiting
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our teachers do, great work, and I think they're trying to find their way with serving a broader continuum of
Yeah.
learners. But the other thing I would say is I'm not sure that we're also convinced these are long-term approaches for the district.
Right.
Some of these things are with our current capacity, as these guys started with teacher advocacy, our current teacher capacity about what they're able to do and the learners they're able to serve in their classroom. As they learn and develop their skills more, the concurrent support class may not be the best option, right?
Right.
We may have better opportunities to serve
Within
that
the
range of
classroom.
continuum of learners in the classroom, but to make a shift where we just eliminate lower level classes without providing some support or some opportunities did not seem like a viable strategy at the time. And so that's why we had went with the concurrent class, knowing all of those challenges. Molly, I mean, that's been pretty familiar since in the era of No Child Left Behind, that some of those things that come up with concurrent classes. But until we can continue to build that teacher efficacy piece around some of those strategies, we do have to look for some solutions like that. Elementary refers, to things commonly as interventions, with that, and I think those are some of the things we're talking about. How can that happen in the classroom, and then what are other structures we can put in support of the secondary building?
So that's my exact question about all of it. In terms of everything you just described with illustrative math and all those things, I was just assuming you guys are right, because this is what you know, right? Like, so just understand, like, that's my perspective is, you guys are the experts on this. So I just assume that part. For me, the issue is, as a board member and a parent, the experience of the kids starting 3 years ago and moving forward. I can't speak to before then because my kids are 14 and 16 now. And so what I'm wondering, related to what Matt just said, is what you're doing is, as you said, a heavy lift on teachers, or whatever, however you said it. Heavy lift for teachers, yeah. And because basically you're coming up with a new, better way to teach math. And I could absolutely say that I don't think I got the best way of learning math at all. So I get it again. It sounds wonderful. The problem is you guys are real good at it, but I know for a fact that my kids have had teachers that didn't understand what you were doing at all. And so they didn't learn what they needed to learn. And then they go to City High, again, anecdotally, it's just where my kids go. We don't have concurrent support classes, for whatever reason. But they didn't have, so City High teachers are still looking for that algorithm learning. And my kids didn't have it, because that's not what they were taught at Southeast. And so what they encountered was, pretty bad math experience so far. They're gonna catch up because they've got supports coming out of their earballs. But, because I can give them that. But I feel like there's a real hitch here that as a board member and parent, I care about more than down the road. I don't actually, this is great. I think you're right. I'm really excited that we're gonna be better at teaching math. I don't care, because I'm sitting on the board right now, as much about that as I do worried about kids. And again, just from my experience, Southeast City, it's not, you got teachers that aren't on the same page. And I know you're working on it. In the meantime, what do we do? Like elementary, you're working on stuff, building blocks, and it's wonderful, and I feel like you have more room to tweak. But junior high sets them up. They're already on this path, whatever that path is. I'm not super into accelerating, just for the record. That's not the perspective I'm coming from. I don't really care if my kids take calculus. I don't care. But I want them to learn math. And if I don't have teachers that know what the next step is and that understand the steps that's before them, my kids didn't learn it very well. So
And
how would, go
And
ahead.
just to build on that, I was
Wait,
just curious.
can I just time out for just a second?
Yeah.
Did you have a question? And I'm trying to think about what am I?
Yeah.
So your
The
question is,
how are we mitigating?
okay.
And Matt said one thing we're doing is the concurrent support. We don't have that at City High, so that doesn't count. So what are we doing to help the junior high kids go from 7th to 8th if some of their teachers get the exciting illustrative math and some of them are like, dude, this is really hard and I'm gonna need some time and it's gonna, okay.
Right.
Again, and I get it, it's hard. Like,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
I wasn't
agree.
arguing with you. I just was like, okay, the question, I got it.
yeah, so how
Thank
do
you.
we
Yep.
mitigate the learning issues? I'm not even gonna call them deficits because I'm not a math teacher. Learning issues that I've seen and that I've heard about from City High teachers being like, the kids come in and we don't understand how they learned it and they don't understand how we're teaching it.
So, and also just to build on that question, I was just curious.
That's inevitable.
Have we involved secondary math teachers in this decision-making process so that we have buy-in?
Decision-making process
For
for
the curriculum? Were they involved in the decision-making process? For the
6th
curriculum?
through 8th grade teachers, yes, we're involved.
But not the
We
high
haven't
school.
done anything with high school yet. High
Okay.
school's not in a pilot year. High school's not buying new curriculum. High school's just keeping on at this point.
Okay.
So yes, there has been buy-in kindergarten through 8th grade for this
Do
curriculum.
we plan to involve the secondary,
Yes.
high school teachers?
I mean, when they pilot curriculum, yes.
So is the illustrative curriculum you're changing to, do they have to understand that that's the difference or is it just gonna make sense even though it's based on illustrative math versus algorithm thinking? Like, how does that work? How does that transition work into the high school?
That was a tie-in from junior high to high
Yeah.
school.
The
vertical
They're both
alignment.
Using two different.
Yeah,
So I mean, I would say even like our Algebra 1 textbook that we use is not part of the same sequence as the geometry textbook which we use, which is different from the pre-calculus textbook, which is different from the calculus textbook.
but aren't we talking about different learning completely, kind of about how we're teaching math, not just
Well, I'm just saying, like, we for a long time, like the geometry textbook from this district that I taught out of for a long time is more in line with illustrative math.
Okay, well,
Okay.
that would make sense, because geometry.
Right.
That makes
so,
sense to me intuitively.
and the algebra textbook is just like completely different. So I guess what I'm saying is like it's not uncommon. Our students and our teachers have like the algebra textbook teaches math one way, and then you go to the geometry textbook and it teaches math another way, and then you go to the algebra 2 textbook and it teaches math a different way. So I guess what I'm saying is this is not a new problem, right? It's not like because we've adopted illustrative math, now we have this new problem. I would say it's an existing problem. My answer to your question right now is not that that's the solution, right? But I just want to point out like that you're articulating is a problem and it's not a new problem.
But that's where proficiency scales.
Yes.
And the work
Yeah.
that's
So,
happening
that's-
in HRS
yeah,
is
so-
also
yes.
going to play a role,
Yeah.
because you're right, and it's the same with social studies.
Right.
We have the same thing, there's different approaches across the different, disciplines within the social sciences, but that's where I think,
The
as
work
7
we're
and
doing.
12 coordinators with our high school, if materials are that way, that's where then the PD time where we're working on proficiency scales, targeted at those priority standards, is going to help
Yeah.
to bridge some of that, because that's going to guide your conversations in your PLC team. It's going to guide the instructional strategies that grow from those conversations, which will, it's not going to be like an immediate fast
But it
fix,
works
but I think that, for me, as I think about it,
Correct. And so that was the piece I was waiting to pop in and say was we've had the conversations coming through, like when we transitioned from Algebra 1A to Algebra 1B, and we had our students who are struggling as they're coming into geometry and into Algebra 2. And so the biggest question right now is, just to answer your question, Mark, of like how we build into supports and interventions in real time for our students.
Yeah.
And so those are pieces that we have identified and figure out exactly how do we make a strong tier 1 process to where teachers can differentiate in the classroom and understand exactly where the students are struggling. So that work we're doing with identifying what those priority standards are, what we're facing a lot of time is when we have math teachers who are teaching every single standard instead of just looking at the priority standards of what students really need to know.
Okay.
And so once we can identify what your high learning is, what is your priority standard, what do you have to know,
Okay.
we can
Teach
then
us
decide how to adjust,
Okay.
and then the proficiency skills will tell us exactly, here's your standard, do you know it, do you not know it, are you proficient? How can we build some real-time intervention and differentiate in the classroom? So for the students who are already excelling and already know it, if I have a class of 35 kids, and of my 35, 20 kids are really struggling, but I have those 15 kids who are already there, I can differentiate and have those 15 kids do something that are in that exceeding level as I'm providing support for my 25 kids who have not reached proficiency
And it's
yet
all
in the
tier one.
classroom.
That's
Yes.
all tier one.
Yeah.
And still working through that tier 1. So that's the goal, is building that teacher efficacy in the classroom, so the teacher have the knowledge and have the ability to say, okay,
Yeah.
I don't have to teach every single standard. I can focus on the main ones that students have to know, and then I can use the time now that I have in my scope and sequence of the year to be intentional about the supports I'm putting in place for those students.
Okay.
And so as far, to answer your question for the adoption process though, because we had that huge cut in our budget for the year for curriculum, we are looking through K-5 was where we're gonna make that full adoption, but I'm working with Adam to verify to see if we can just do a K-8 adoption, since we're already doing the pilot process for Imagine Learning. So if we can do the K-8 adoption, then that means we're doing, because we have middle school coming in, we didn't want the students who are already getting this learning now to miss out and go back to a different process for another year until we can decide what that curriculum funds would look like for them. So K-8 has been our big process of it. We can work on that adoption for K-8. Then we'll start looking at what we're going to do for 9-12, because that is our next step for next year, is to start piloting the 9-12 program and to see, looking at the data that we're collecting from this pilot process this year, of what we can be doing differently as far as what professional development would look like when we're talking about the acceleration process. That is a huge shift in professional development, because we know at the elementary level, if we can create that strong structure and base at our elementary level for our students and at our junior high, once they hit high school, they will already come in with some of those strategies and skills already in place, to where then that struggle is not as hard for them. But it really requires teachers to shift how they teach and where they feel their strength and support is when it comes to building students' ability to learn math and do it well. And so we have to really change, even with our ELP process or how we're providing some accelerated learning in that classroom, how we can do a stronger tier 1. So all of that is a process that we're working through, but the goal is to shift into 9-12, hopefully next year, to start piloting for 9-12, and that does involve all of our math teachers from 9-12 in that collaboration of looking at different resources and then deciding, let's look at the data from K-8 and do a full vertical alignment to then determine exactly what resources we need to look at and then pilot before we can adopt. So yeah, that would take another 2 years before we adopt for 9-12 math.
And I mean, just the vertical articulation, it's a great question, you know, and it's, when you have these new things that are happening, we had it in social studies when we did Inquire Ed, and it's like, oh, this is amazing, so then how do we make sure that our secondary teachers know that this is the process students went through, these are the standards, you know, and we started to, you know, Thursday PD time is limiting for secondary. It's hard to even, like I love the regional blocks, but, you know, it's just a different end of the school day and contract day, so you just don't have as much time. But, you know, starting last year, we've all, you know, pulled out time that are half-day or full-day PD models with teams from across the district to work on things like that. So the teachers have time outside of sort of the busy day or just a limited time on Thursday where they can get together and they can work with, you know, Kate and the other coordinators depending on their area, where they have a chance to really talk and workshop it. And
I'm willing to
figure
bet
it
that
out.
Kate has like 1,000 things that she could say.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious though. Like, I wish I could just download what you're thinking about how you've worked on, this connection that I'm worried about, because this is what you do. And I'm directing it to Kate because I mostly understand secondary stuff, and that's what I read. I know that you know how to do it. I just wish I could understand all of it. So don't get me wrong. I feel like you probably have a lot of things you'd like to say. Now I need you to do this, City High. Just as an example, I'm just using City High. But like, you know, their teachers better be listening so that we're embracing these challenges, because I think teachers in certain disciplines, especially ones that are easier to define, are going to be like, no, this is how we do it. We do algorithm teaching. This is how math is, right?
The one thing I think about,
You
just
know what I mean?
boil it down
Yeah.
to the most basic HRS stuff, right? The standards are the standards. We have alignment on what we're teaching for the priority standards. The standards are the standards, and then we talk about the way we teach it. And I think that's where you're seeing some difference. The curriculum is still going to be tied to the same standards, right? Like the unique part of the curriculum is going to be in the way, right? It's taught, the strategies they teach to use in the curriculum. So when we have some gap, the first thing, you know, that they're talking about is kind of that simultaneous work about identifying the standards as a group. That as a group, we've identified these as what we said are the most important things, and then we're all going to learn together about how to teach it similar and encounter and you know get through some of these challenges we've talked about. So if you just pull the math out of it, you know, and just think about that's the same push-pull we should have in every content area. What are the core standards, and then how do we best teach those standards?
The reason why we're having this meeting though is we do hear a lot about math.
No, I know, but
So
that's
why
what I'm saying.
I'm
So,
like,
but if you back that out to any content area, the challenge is still the same. Sometimes we get
Yeah.
lost in the fact it's math, right? And so
I would just hate it if people left this meeting and thought like, well, now we have a new problem, right? Now our new problem is we adopted this curriculum and now we have this gap. That's the only, I'm not saying it's not a problem.
Right, no, I hear you.
Right. I'm just saying like, oh, I don't want you to leave and think like, oh God, if we hadn't adopted this thing, then we wouldn't have this problem. That's the only point I was trying to make.
Absolutely.
The other thing that it makes me think about is this idea in education that people have this misconception that in order for your actions to change, your beliefs have to change first. Right? And trying to get people to change their beliefs, I mean, we could do that for the next 20 years, right? But what I actually need you to do is to change your action, even if you don't believe in the action you're taking. I need you to change your action. And your beliefs will change because kids will change them. They will come into your room, they will perform. Yep, it will work. And then, you know, you won't even remember that you held this belief, you know, but if we start with trying to change teachers' beliefs, I mean, that's forever, right?
I think
but
that's been the problem. And not from your perspective of teachers not wanting to.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's
Which
like their
it's what got
identity.
forced. It's what got forced when the decision was made to get rid of below level classes in high school, right? We didn't wait for teachers to change their beliefs about whether or not they thought that was a good idea. We said, your school's going to take this action. Right? And so now we're in the uncomfortable part of, oh my gosh, I have to take this action. My beliefs are changing. I can only speak from my own perspective, but when my beliefs change, I'm really uncomfortable.
Right.
For a long time until, you know, my beliefs have changed. So I think that's part of. The other thing I just want to say really quickly about the concurrent support classes, I think we took a step in the right direction, and I think what we need to do now is fine-tune. I know why we picked to have concurrent support classes. It's because it was supported in the literature. Now there's been more research done about it. Actually, the most effective co-remediation course to have paired with Algebra 1 is statistics. So right now, our co-remediation courses are trying to backfill skills, right? Some of our co-remediation courses with Algebra 1 right now is like, oh, you don't know how to add fractions? I'm going to teach you how to add fractions. And it's like, no, forget about that. The best co-remediation course for students in Algebra 1 is to take a statistics course.
Wow.
Can I also just add that taking AP Psych at the same time as stats is a really
Yeah, and it's fun, right? Yeah. And so it wouldn't be appropriate to have our freshmen take an AP Stat course, but it would be appropriate to have them take a Stat course.
Yeah.
Right? As a co-remediation class with Algebra 1. That would be another thing where people probably aren't going to believe it. Right? But I need you to take the action.
No, seriously, this parent would not have believed it.
Yeah, now I'm going to tell my kids that they've got to take
So she's going to go.
It's a must, yes.
Here's your action.
I'm totally doing that.
So anyway, it was important to me to include this because I think it's a really good illustration of like, in my belief, we took the right first step, right? And we said, let's get rid of below grade level classes. And we also took a right step in that we said, let's ask other people what's been successful. And other people have said co-remediation courses with Algebra 1, right? But now the next, in my opinion, best step to take with that is to say like, okay, it's not just any course. It's not just we offer this course and the teacher chooses what to do, right? It's we know that you need to be pairing Algebra 1 with statistics. Right, because that's what we know from the literature. That's actually what I went to Kirkwood for, right? They do the same thing. Their students that don't test into a math class for college credit, they put them in the equivalent to Algebra 1 and they pair it with a stat course.
That's
because
what they did for me as a freshman in college. They did. I was terrible at math and they put me on.
Because the pass rates are higher, right? And so to me, that's like the next right thing to
And
do.
it could be more applicable. I don't know why, but right, maybe you can understand statistics as opposed to
for
abstract.
one, I'm excited to see in a year the data
Yeah.
for our math scores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even
Well, it's going to take longer than a year.
yeah,
You might
even
see slight improvement.
Yeah.
Right.
because this
Right,
has always
especially I'm
been.
talking more K through.
Oh, yeah.
I think you could look at the buildings that we did illustrative
Yes.
last year, and then the ones
Yes,
that we used
that would be
this year,
great.
and then follow that,
Follow
cohort
those
of
groups.
K or first
Does
grade
that
kids to
curriculum go up through secondary?
It
Through
does.
high school? Okay.
It's written
Because
through
we've
algebra.
always had this issue, even in the same curriculum, two teachers could be teaching
Yeah,
it
100%.
totally different. So again, maybe it doesn't help our kids right now, but the change we're working for that we're not going to see is if all subject areas have common assessments, we're measuring the same thing, and that's going to teach.
Yeah.
So it is. I'd rather start, like you said, change the action, and the beliefs will come, than just not start and do it the way we've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
work very well.
You're talking about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time to do it is
It's
today,
right
right?
now.
Right.
So the best time to have done this would have been
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
years ago before any of our children had to experience that, but the next best time is to start right now, so.
The data that we do have is that we don't have tons of kids in below level classes now, right? And from, a demographic problem we usually have. And we did get a group of teachers together, right, that believed in that change and knew it was the right thing to do. Now, the majority of teachers in the district, right, not everybody's brought into that conversation. On some level, yes, we have to make a decision, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago already, right, that the district made that switch and we got rid of those below grade level classes. So that's a data point you don't have to see, right? The kids are in there, and the world hasn't spun off its axis, right? Yes, we've had some failure rates, to watch and be concerned about. Yes, we've had some teachers that have felt ill-equipped to serve all the kids. But those are problems that we're working to solve, rather than continuing to look at a bunch of kids being served in below grade level content. So, which problem do you want to try to solve, right? I think that's what we're doing, is moving down that trajectory and figuring out now how do we better supplement, how do we better support, the work in those areas. So, Charlie, I think you had a question. I jumped in.
Yeah, sorry to get off track here. One of the things that's always important to me is to look at the percentage of kids who are proficient in various subject areas, including math in the district, over long periods of time. So I'm thinking, does the illustrative math concept or way of teaching, which, as I understand it from your slides, emphasizes student cooperation or students working in group, So what happens when students are used to working in groups to solve a math problem, get the IASB in front of them, which they can't do as a group?
Well, I think you're not doing everything collaboratively. You know, there are the times where students are then doing some things independently as well too. We also look at like assessment that are tied into the classroom. Every day there's cool down is what they're called, and so it's kind of your exit slip that your students are doing independently then, and that you're able to then take that information. But kind of the idea really is, and I think about it as when I'm even learning something new, we're working on a project, you know, when I have that other person there, that I also can be talking to them, or I can hear their ideas or their approach to it, my learning deepens. And so that's really what illustrative is highlighting, is that a lot of times it's the students will work independently and then they'll come together and then they'll share out large group. And the art of the teacher in that is the facilitation of it. It's the teacher who's walking around and who's listening to the conversations and is able to then sequence even how they're going to be sharing something large group. And so, you know, when you talked about like algorithms, they'll still learn, you know, the standard algorithm, traditional algorithm that we learned with long division. They'll still see that. But it's developing this deeper understanding and to be able to see it represented in different ways also. I always think back to like fractions. Think about dividing fractions right now. Don't ask why, just flip and multiply. You know, but really if we're able to get to where our students understand what's happening and can approach it from different ways, and they're hearing those different ways from each other, they're building that deeper understanding. So then when they get to those higher level classes, it's not just, oh, I'm following this rote procedure, you know, and they have those written down in their notes, and that's what they're going to follow and hopefully memorize for the test.
Well, we know the gradual release of responsibility model works with people's learning, right?
The what?
The gradual release of responsibility. Okay, so it's like the I do, we do, you do approach, right? So when Krista was talking first at the beginning about the balance, well, it was all I do. It's all the teacher, right? That's that teacher load piece, right? Well, we're talking about more we do, and then the student still does the you do part, right? I mean, at the very end with the, okay, now I have to still know this independently, right? But we're going through the learning process in a little different, probably proportional representation of that teacher load about the way a lot of us experienced education, right? The teacher, the sage on the stage, sharing all that information, and I do think you would see instruction shifting in our buildings drastically in that approach, that it's not that anymore. I mean, these things have killed that approach for us, right? And so that purveyor of knowledge, or whatever that terminology you guys used, you know, for the instructor up there, I think you're seeing that shift through that model to a different approach.
I think also just the really short answer to your question is McCrell is a research company that has partnered with Imagine Learning, and they do outside research to test the efficacy of the curriculum. And Imagine Learning really wants to be labeled as a high quality curriculum because ESSER dollars are attached to that. And the way you become a high quality curriculum is by getting a certain percentage of your students proficient on the ISASP or the Missouri State Test or whatever. So the measure is still what I would say is like the traditional measure, right? And so Imagine Learning has been identified as a high quality curriculum in many other states. The reason we got our materials for free is because they're hoping to use our student data this year to qualify as a high quality curriculum in the state of Iowa, and that's measured through proficiency rates on the ISASP. So.
Okay, and then just one more thing. I actually learned math in the 1950s. So, and I'm sure there are other parents in the district who also learned math during that period of time. So when I hear illustrative math described, I hear students working in teams and collaboration and so forth, and other things that I actually didn't do in the 1950s when I was learning math. So I hope as we go forward here that we're able to respond to parents who have no background personally in their math learning about these probably much better ways of learning math.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to hit the last slide. I think there's one more.
One more, right?
Yeah.
You got a little notification up on the upper right. You got to swipe out.
Oh,
This?
add on?
Yeah, once that goes away.
Maybe just click on your position from that blurry. Yeah, just
Kate addressed half of this part, especially with that proficiency thing with the ISAFs and the work that we're doing with McCrell as far as that data sharing. The big piece is that we do hope to see a change. Like you said, it may not happen right away, but the goal is, as we start tracking the data and tracking the new curriculum, we're hoping to see a shift when it comes to our equity, when it comes to proficiency, when it comes to growth. And so that's the bigger picture of it all. But in addition to that, we will be working with, I say we as in the math coordinators, K-12, we'll be working with our data team, with Austin and Joshua, to do a deep dive into our data, because the goal is that we don't want to just see, when we see that shift in 5 years, in 2027, that we want to see to go from 67% to 75% for math. We don't want it just to be a district space of where we're looking just at the overall district data, but we want to go from the top overall, yes, but then break it down more into, now what is it saying building wise, now what is it saying by kid, what is it saying as far as our demographics for our ELL, for our free and reduced, for our Black and brown students, like what are we really doing to provide those intentional supports? So it's just not, hey, we got there, we got to 75%, check the box, done, but can we continue growing? And can we continue making an impact and shifting so that we can stay above that 75 and 80% for all of our students? And so the new, there's a new resource that we have through the state, through DE, and it's only available for the next 2 years, but the data team is trying to replicate it so we can have it consistently, and it's called EVOS. And it goes back to learning loss that happened through COVID years. And so it really pulls all the data from ISAPS. And we can see district growth, we can see individual buildings growth, and we can see individual student growth. And then it breaks the growth down also by demographics. So we can see exactly, looking at our 3 years data for ISAPS, for math, or for language arts, is there a chance for growth in schools, for students, for the district in itself? And so based off of that, we'll be working with the strategic team. We're going to pull some IDS teachers, some principals, and the coordinators together to really dig into that data and determine exactly how we can build some support so we can meet our proficiency and growth goals by 2027 and exceed it if anything. And so that's our hope. But also with illustrative math and how we're shifting how we teach math and how we think about math, the hope is that should also provide some support if we can strengthen Tier 1.
So I think that the thing that makes us different than other districts is that we have HRS. At the same time, we have people that are bringing us to a different level of math curriculum. And I wish you guys weren't related, because it sucks when I'm trying to like say something to Kate and knowing you're here, because I just want it to be like, he's not here. I'm telling you this as if he's not here. I'm really, no, but it's in the air.
Yeah.
I work with my husband, so it's just, I want you guys to know this is the difference. This level, it's really hard for people like me to understand because it has to do with math, but I just love, this is what makes us different. JP, you had the good question. You're not a mathematician. You brought in that. This is really important for our board to be able to answer questions about. So I know we took a ton of your time, way longer than you thought we were going to, but we get so many questions. Mm-hmm. And when you're an English major, you have no idea how to answer those questions. And I feel like I feel better about it. And if you do get follow-up questions from any of us, it's just so that as board members, we can respond better to people. I found this to be very helpful.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
Very.
It does give us a better foundation of wanting to respond, answer, and then be able to point them to the folks that's like, we're more in depth because these are the people that specialize in that. But here's my takeaway and how we're going to get to your point, but these people can take you even farther.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that we spend so much time on this after everybody's workday and we're still just like chomping at the bit. Again, why I love this district. Well, all the staff and the fact that we have the board totally engaged. Why we have this education committee as a committee of the whole. It's just.
It's great.
It's great. It's exciting.
Yeah.
For
and
the
I
kids.
hope you all are feel a little bit like, oh, I wish he hadn't deleted the math problem slide.
Oh, I don't know if I'll go that far.
And we could solve it in groups at our table.
Thank you for deleting.
Yes. That would have been totally worth it.
Okay. Our next meeting is October 17th. Does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned. Thank you so much.